humanities audience, but actually we're so in tune, we're sort of, in terms of that introduction, we're absolutely in tune, so I feel like there's no gap whatsoever. But one of the things perhaps we can talk about in the discussion is whether there are differences, nuanced differences in approaches from people who come more from humanities and social science. I'd be very interested to talk about that actually. So as Paolo said, I've been interested for a very long time in the relationship between technology and time. And in fact, I'm originally or mainly a sociologist of work and employment, and so I was very much brought up on Marx and Wajcman and thinking about the assembly line and workplace technologies and how they affect time, and very influenced when I was young by E.P. Thompson's very famous essay on the role of clocks in the making of industrial capitalism. And I mean, I could go on about clocks a long time. I mean, in fact, I take my students every year to the British Museum because I found the curator of horology in a basement down there, and he's got thousands and thousands of clocks, and he shows the students the early pendulum and the fact that actually people lived for centuries without the concept of the second, because there wasn't sort of a second hand. And so I always think it's sort of very interesting to have a historical take on these things and think about how much actually, which is sort of one of my themes, the technologies themselves are part of making time, are part of our understanding of time. I mean, perhaps I should admit that as a young feminist, I was a very early adopter of the dishwasher. People were always amazed by this because I had read that the dishwasher did indeed save time, and there was a big debate about whether the answer to women's liberation was in fact a set of domestic technologies. Of course, that wasn't the case. But I also extend my interest in technology to domestic technologies, and it seems to be one of the areas that's only now being addressed with the Internet of Things and the robo-vacuum cleaner and those sort of things. So I think we need a very broad sense of what technology is. But with all of those interests, I became very intrigued by the fact that everywhere there was this perception that the pace of everyday life was faster than it used to be. And again, there's always a historical assumption, that we're living in a new era, things are faster, whether it's high-speed trading or speed dating, somehow the pace of everyday life has speeded up. And everyone complains about how busy and time-pressed they are. Absolutely everyone. This is the common refrain. And we're constantly also told, which I think is interesting, that the pace of technological innovation in itself is also accelerating, and that there's a direct causal link between our experience of the speed of everyday life being faster and the rate of technological innovation. And I want to unpack that towards the end of the talk. But just to entertain you a bit with some sort of silly things. As Paolo said, I'm very struck by the fact that the cyber gurus of Silicon Valley are endlessly telling us that they're making these technologies to make our lives better, more efficient, so we can multitask. There's a technological fix for absolutely everything in terms of time. I mean, it's very nice of you to admit you're wearing one of those watches, one of the self-trackers, although my friend Gina Neff in Oxford has written a book recently on self-tracking, and she says it's just anecdotal that even though the market for self-tracking devices is absolutely phenomenal now, apparently after 3 months most people don't use them. It's again it's like, I think, a lot of domestic technologies if you buy it and put it in the shelf or something. But anyway, and I'm very struck as well by the debates about the self-driving car, and that this will as well save time. And I must say that I went to a conference in Washington with some of the people who are designing the self-driving car, and they publicly, of course, always talk about accidents and that they're saving lives, and they privately just talk about being able to work between their house in San Francisco and going to Mountain View or wherever it happens to be, that this will be sort of a saving time in terms of extending work time. Now, as a sociologist, what interests me is how much, I teach a master's in social theory at the LSE, and so I was just very struck over the years of teaching social theory that there was a whole raft of sociologists. And I mean, they're all very different. They come from different backgrounds and have very different views, and I'm not for a minute saying that they've got the same view. But what's interesting is how much writing there's been on time, how these sociologists, who are all very good at making fantastic careers, think up their own concept, their own word, how they want to describe this new time. And just what I want to say about this is that even though they differ in many, many ways, it seems to me that all of them agree that speed is the defining characteristic of contemporary life. They all agree that things are speeding up. They all agree that the driving force is technology, while of course they all say that they're not technological determinists, but really, when you look at these, I think technology is hugely significant there. And they all agree that it's a bad thing, that this is socially destructive. And it's a sort of cautionary tale about speed, and I think what's interesting is that we get this in popular literature too. I used to buy every single book on speed and slowness, and I gave up because actually the rate of production of these books is absolutely sort of phenomenal about the problems of digital distraction. As you said, Sherry Turkle is now, interestingly, after so many fantastic books being quite positive and interesting about technology that we all read and loved, and the last two, Alone Together or whatever, and the Conversation one, which is almost similar theme, she's now decided it's all gone too far, it's destroying relationships, reminisces about how she used to write letters to her mother and she's got all these letters, and her daughter doesn't do this anymore, so she won't have the letters. Whole thing at the end. She does tell me that her daughter didn't mind actually being in the book. I have to say that I just cringed at this, and that I would never do this to my kid, but this might be something to do with a particular culture. And some of you may know, Tim Wu's work, who's very well known for fighting for net neutrality. And even he has brought out, actually it's a very interesting book called The Attention Merchants, but talks about how that attention is the new business. The most important thing for business now will be actually having attention, and that there's never been so little attention. And so it's again this assumption that we haven't got attention, that things are going from bad to worse. And the solution is often a digital detox. Lock away the machines and return to a more authentic way of life. And Morozov, when I've heard him, talks about the fact that he literally locks away his machine when he's trying to write one of his books. There are lots of places like this in California where you can go for the weekend, and when you get there, as you can see, you leave all your machines in there and you have a lovely weekend, disconnected. And I think it's very smart that their byline is disconnect to reconnect. Of course, when you go on the website, they ask you for your email so they can keep in touch, which I think is good. And as a friend of mine at the Internet Institute said, who's a Facebook guy, said, I bet you on Monday morning they all go on their Facebook and boast about how they last a whole weekend without these connections. And my favourite one recently was Ariana Huffington, and I'd heard about this before I saw it, is now turning to sleep, as this is the real problem, is kind of sleep. And I love the sort of byline, sleep your way to the top, absolutely. Fantastic. Actually, somebody said to me, I think in Austria or Germany, or said, you do know what that means, don't you? I said, yeah. But when you have a look at her new business, Thrive Global, one can't help taking a piece of things like this. Literally, there's a pop shop that she's running in New York or something. You've been on it. Anyway, in this pop shop, she literally is selling a sort of mini bed. It's like a little sort of bed. And it's a bed where you can plug in all your machines. So you're supposed to put this little bed outside your bedroom and plug in all your machines so that they, overnight, so they're recharged overnight. And they're outside your sort of bedroom, and so your sleep is, separated. This is the making a sort of new boundary. Okay, so I think, as I've said, that a lot of this writing is still very technological determinist in the sense that somehow we're hostages to the logic of these machines, that the only way to deal with them is to sort of put them aside, and that the technologies themselves are compelling us into this fast life. And what I argue in the book in a line is that I try and very much emphasise that this contemporary imperative of speed is as much a sort of cultural compulsion as it is a technological one. That if we feel rushed and pressed for time, it's because of the collective societal cultural priorities we set ourselves, how we think about these things, rather than the machines themselves. And in science and technology studies, which I practice, I suppose I could say, the approach I adopt with my colleagues, we think about technology as a socio-material practice. We've sort of tried to think about that for many years, you know, that technologies are always social, that they're always socio-technical, that they've always got politics within them, that we try and think about sort of agency as really the product of these relationships between human and machines. And that makes us think about time as something, as I've said, that we experience actually with and through machines, that we sort of make our everyday time with and through machines. And it leads me to questions, to slightly sort of different questions than some of these social theories, which is questions like, you know, how did acceleration come to signify the zeitgeist? You know, how is it that acceleration, speed, is taken as the quintessential experience of modernity? How has it gained so much legitimacy? And what are the political implications of this, which I'm going to talk about at the end. And I'll end by questioning the idea that the fastest technologies are necessarily the best technologies. Okay, now my next point, which you all know, but I always think it's important to emphasise, is that of course we're not unique in experiencing this idea that we're in a period of unprecedented speed. When I was writing the book, I went back to read George Simmel and Simmel's discussion. I gather you've done some work on Simmel. About it as involving immediacy, simultaneity, presentism. And I sort of read it and I thought, my goodness, this is exactly what social theorists, this is exactly the terms that are being used today. Now, I'm not saying that things aren't different, but I do think that it's very important, as opposed to a lot of this macro-social theory, to always think about the continuities as well as the breaks, if you like, and particularly how much this old dichotomy, if you like, between on the one hand moral panics and on the other hand messianic hopes, that this still sort of so frames our debate. And actually I can sort of remember, I mean, you know, it must be 30 years ago, I hate to say, saying, oh, you know, I'm not going to give every talk saying it's positive and it's negative. But I mean, actually, we just seem so stuck in exactly that way of presenting these things and thinking about these things. And it seems very hard to sort of get past that in terms of our thinking. Okay, so I think it's basically a mistake to assume that acceleration is some universal, uniform process affecting all aspects of everyday life. I think that you only accept that view, this sort of single regime, if you like, of incessant speed, if you attribute too much agency to technology itself. And it seems to me that what's missing from a lot of this macro-social theory, all of which claims to have a politics of time, I mean, actually what's missing is the temporal in the sense of our everyday experiences of time, in their social, political, and economic context. And I mean, if you think about it, we don't all have the same experience of time, and actually time, our experience of time, varies phenomenally. The textures, the rhythms of time vary in intensity depending what we're doing, where we're doing it, with whom we're doing things. It's actually a very complicated picture. And it's also important, I think, and we'll sort of talk about this, to think about time as a collective accomplishment rather than an individual resource. And these things can be encompassed by a sort of dichotomous simple view of a dynamic of acceleration. I mean, think of something like quality time with children, where I mean, that sort of time is a special kind of time, and we're endlessly told, even by Sherry Turkle, that quality time with kids is much worse than it was because parents are always on their mobile phone. If you get those photos, I should have one of them, which is always the distracted parent on the mobile phone. I mean, actually, if you look at time use studies, I mean, one of the things I do is a lot of empirical work on time use using time use budget. What you find over the last 50 years is that the amount of time parents are spending with their children has actually increased significantly, not decreased. And we also know, because time use studies are very detailed, that time is actually face-to-face time, it's creative time, it's talking and playing with kids. And so if anything, I argue that parenting, expectations of parenting and how people are doing parenting has become much more intensive. And in the book I sort of talk about this in terms of, that I've always been interested in the intensification of paid work, being an old Marxist, but I never really thought that there could be something like the intensification of parenting. And it seems to me that that's one of the demands that is that's a big time demand that has increased, that is never sort of part of these discussions, because actually these social groups don't think that much about gender relations at all, if the truth be known. So I argue very much that I think of the relationship between speed and time as dialectical, and so I think while it may be true that some things are speeding up, I think some things may be slowing down, and I mean the parental time I think is just sort of one example of that, but we can think of lots of other examples of fast time and slow time being in relation to each other. I've done a lot of work on mobile phones. I actually did a project on mobile phones when they were completely new in Australia and I didn't have a mobile phone. I'm actually a late adopter of various of these technologies, and I remember well that mobile phones were originally designed for business use, and that quickly people and particularly mothers started using these phones to contact family and friends and their kids. And I'm endlessly told that mobile phones have diffused faster than any other technology in human history. I mean, how people make these claims, I don't know. But anyway, let's say, and isn't this sort of just completely amazing? And I sort of think yes and no. I mean, I think what's interesting is that actually the mobile phone is a phone that's mobile, and that people knew how to use a phone actually, were accustomed to using a phone and had uses of phones, and it was a development of an existing technology. But also it seems to me that really what's been happening is that there's been huge changes in work, which I know that you're going to talk about today, much more flexible working practices, that most people now live in dual families rather than in traditional families where women aren't working, and that the coordination problems, the synchronization problems are much more difficult than they used to be. And sociologists talk about this as a sort of de-routinized society or an asynchronization society. But I think these scheduling problems are crucial in terms of people's feelings of busyness. The issue there isn't a shortage of time, but an issue of scheduling. And it seems to me that that's the context in which the mobile phone gets diffused, that it comes on the market precisely at a time where its use is about structural changes in the economy and the labour market. Now, all of this is, of course, very related to power relations, and as I've been very interested in email, and I always, when I give talks, and I study knowledge workers' use of email in great detail, and what's very clear is that information overload and email and these things are not to do with the speed of data transmission, aren't to do with the technology, but are to do with collective norms that have built up about appropriate response times. Actually, I've been off email now for 4 days because my account was compromised. And the first thing I, of course, said when I arrived today is, oh my God, you've probably been sending a million things. And I haven't been able to respond, and there's no note saying that I'm not getting my emails and such like. So it's about expectations. And everyone is very keen that I've spoken to, having read about the French ban on emails at weekends, which is something that's highly cited. And I have to say that at the senior management, should I call people in universities? Yes, why? Senior management were talking about the fact that the practice of emailing, particularly administrative staff, late at night and at the weekend should really stop, and that we should institute a new culture of email. I mean, clearly, the LSE is one place, and Google and Silicon Valley is another place, and I really can't imagine, given the sort of workaholic practices in high-tech companies, that this would ever take on. But I do like to think that in 20 years' time, or maybe 10 years' time, a lot of different practices will have emerged in relation to these technologies, and that we're always having, I mean, you know, kind of the problem with dealing with these technologies is the newness, actually. I'm much more comfortable thinking about the telegraph, the railway, and then you can see, you know, over 100 years how these technologies have become naturalised and become embedded, and how we sort of adapted to them, whereas we're sort of chasing things like smartphones all the time. But my general point here is that time is lived in the context of an array of differences, where some people's time is much more valued than other people's time, and where some people actually gain speed at the expense of other people. And if I could just sort of give you a quick example of this, there's a terrific book by Sarah Sharma called In the Meantime, a Canadian scholar, where there's a case study of taxi drivers, and she has a very nice extended example there of how taxi drivers, and I think it's in Montreal or New York or somewhere, spend a lot of time waiting in order to facilitate the speed of people in the city, richer people in the city, who want to get around very quickly. And so she does it's a very nice piece on the sort of waiting and speed, and that some groups are actually facilitating the speed of other groups, and that these things are always differentiated by economic inequality. Okay, nevertheless, we're all constantly encouraged to work on our time, which is what all these tracking devices are. We should all work on our time. And it seems to me that the notion now is that having a good relationship with time is equated with having a good relationship with technology. That if you can manage technologies well, you can manage your time well. And I mean, I've been so far, I've just got another, not even 5 minutes. I've so far been stressing the sort of cultural compulsion of speed, because I'm always trying to argue against this technological imperative. But I now, for a few minutes, want to turn to the technologies themselves, because of course, I think the technologies matter. I mean, that's why I'm a science and technology studies person. And I think why it matters is because the sort of technologies we have now are feeding cultural expectations of speed. And as you said in your introduction, it seems to me that these innovations feed the notion that the faster we do things, the more we will save time. That the more innovations there are, the more productive and efficient we will be. And it seems to me that this ethos, that the fastest, most automated technologies are the best, is absolutely the ethos of engineering, it's the ethos of Silicon Valley, and that when people talk about innovative products, that's what they mean. And one of the things I've been very much concerned with in my science and technology studies work is really question this notion that the most inventive, best technologies are necessarily the most automated and the fastest. That this equation, I think, we really need to sort of question this discourse of sort of speed and novelty. And if you think about the imaginaries, what we call in STS the socio-technical imaginaries, but you know, the sort of utopias that Silicon Valley provides for us, the ideas of the future, they're heavily shaped and populated by new technology with tropes. And they're tropes in which we're told that everything will be really different, but I know I don't need to tell this audience that they're very conservative ones, in which actually it seems to me everything will be the same. We might get a self-driving car, but the social relations of work, that are envisaged will be exactly the same. It's a very sort of technological definition of a different future. Okay, so just to sort of conclude, let me make it clear that I'm not nostalgic for a less digitalised, less technological world. I haven't joined slow time movements, which are proliferating. I mean, I must say when I first looked up mindfulness and slow time, there's now slow science, slow reading, slow academia. Slow food is the obvious one, but I don't know, did any of you see the program on the BBC where they had a canal boat? What do you call those? Long boats? Yes. Yeah? Going down the canal all day at its own speed. I mean, there's quite a lot of slow film now, slow TV. There's slow everything. I don't think that's the solution, actually. I mean, I'm much more sort of engaged with trying to argue for a more discriminating and demanding approach to the kinds of technologies that we get and the values they might serve. And one of the things I find troubling, and a colleague of mine actually in Vienna, Ulrike Feld, has written very nicely about this, is how this rhetoric of sort of speed and acceleration makes it very, very hard to take on Silicon Valley companies or technological innovation companies and say, look, actually, we would like a bit of democratic deliberation. We would like a bit of citizens' input into the kinds of technologies that you're designing, and to which we are just told, oh, it's, you know, we can't afford to slow down. You know, if we slow down the pace of change, you know, other people will get ahead of us, and all of this sort of thing. So it's a sort of rhetoric, I think, a narrative that actually politically is very effective at trying to stop more intervention into the direction and development of technological change, which, you know, I'm sort of very concerned about, and also very concerned about the secrecy of companies in terms of sort of what they're doing as well, and the notion that these companies can self-regulate, so that the fact that a lot of these companies now are themselves setting up ethics boards, even though we don't know very much about these ethics boards, seems to me a very slow start to really a proper public engagement about the direction of technological change and innovation. So just to conclude, I would argue that our sense of time has always been intimately bound up with technologies and objects and clocks and various technologies. And I don't think of digital time as being so different. I think it ultimately needs to be understood in terms of how we humans use, interact with, and indeed build technology. And if we want to take more control of time, discretionary time as it's often called, we really need to contest this cult of speed and harriedness and use our inventiveness to redesign a different politics of time.